grow up, listening to Disney fairy tales, happily ever after. We think that's going to be the case for us. And so when that dream doesn't come true, when your expectations in life aren't met, when your belief system is rocked to its core, it causes a whole host of things, a whole host of responses. And those responses are in the methodology, we refer to as the stress response. So if you think about your emotional state as being on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is red zone, D-Day, scorched earth, Carrie making the walls bleed, you're going to kill everybody. And 10 is Buddhist monk meditation retreat. The things that happen when you are going through a divorce are things that push you in that 1, 2, 3 towards the top of the scale, because you are in that stress response, we call it. And the big trigger behind that stress response is a perception of danger. And so what's the danger in a divorce? The danger is economic danger, it's reputational danger, it's danger of changed relationship with your children, maybe not sleeping in the same home as them, or having to come up with some type of pattern where they're going back and forth, or where you're having to rely on a former spouse to financially contribute to raising them, or you're having to contribute because you ended up being the more successful partner, and that's just how it works. Whoever makes the more money in the marriage pays for the divorce and pays child support. So there's all different types of ways that you could perceive that you are in danger as a result of going through the divorce process, and going through the process of that 2 became 1, now that 1 becoming 2 again. And so as someone who is a former divorce attorney, I have seen a range of ways that people respond to that. And the host of behaviors kind of generally fall into 3 categories, like where it's either fight, flight, or freeze. So the fighting, includes things like lashing out, using the kids as pawns, shifting assets, threatening to take all the friends. There's all different ways that people fight in divorces. And because of that, there's a cottage industry for like shark divorce attorneys who like play nasty and punish, make your spouse suffer. Because of that perception of danger response in one of 3 categories: fight, flight, freeze. So the flight is also another one. And I personally dealt with this with clients who would say, I'm not sure if I want a divorce, I don't know, give me a month, I'll call back. And so one of the things that happens in divorce cases, if there isn't movement in the case for a certain period of time, the case actually gets dismissed. So for want prosecution is the legal phrase. But sometimes people, it's like they're so paralyzed by like, oh my gosh, I know I filed, I know I asked for this, but I'm really thinking about it, and like, was it really so bad? And maybe I can just live with it. So they freeze, or they just try to run away from the problem and get into like avoidant behaviors by like using substances like alcohol or narcotics to kind of numb. And so there's a host of ways that people, fight, flight, freeze when they have these stress responses to this perception of being in not physical danger, but emotional danger, and danger of loss of a dream, and danger of, some unwanted outcome. In the case of my mother, she grew up in Africa. Both my parents did. And there are a lot of very deeply ingrained messages in the culture about your value as a woman being tied to being married and having children and being respectable, and to, meeting the expectations that are imposed upon you by the great and mighty them, the nameless, faceless, people that you're supposed to know who they are and what they want of you, and live up to them. And so, and the ways that you do that are by getting married, by having children, by making sure your children are successful and then you can brag about them. And so for her, to suddenly not have that, even though in the case of her divorce, my father was her choice, it it shook her. And what she didn't fully appreciate is the reason it was so traumatic is because her core beliefs about who she was, about what made her worthy, about you know, what made her acceptable as a woman were rocked by the choice to get divorced. And that is significant because, we all have core beliefs. And the way that you know what your core beliefs are, the simplest way is to just look at your behavior, because it is almost impossible to consistently behave in a way that is inconsistent with what you believe to be true. So your core beliefs show up in your patterns and your habits and the things that you just can't stop doing. The printout of your core beliefs. Like if you think about the idea of a printer, like what does it print out? It prints out whatever programming tells it to. So your core beliefs, the printout of them is your actions. Um, and so, with those core beliefs about who you are as a woman, the other thing that um, is also, activated is just a wave of emotions. And emotions are not good or bad. They just are, and um, if you are not accustomed to feeling them well, then it can be, really scary. And what often happens in divorces is that people do quote unquote crazy things and they're not really sure why they did what they did. In the methodology, we often refer to this as discharging or in charging, but in the case of divorce, there's a lot of discharging, whether it's, lashing out at a new romantic partner of your spouse, whether it's doing something like showing up at their job, with there's all kinds of examples. But the way to combat that is to learn how to feel emotions skillfully. And so my tips for having a green zone divorce and moving through divorce, and this is, both from before I did the methodology and now, is to start, if you are in that process, by having a very clear vision of what you want your life to be like after the divorce is over. Have a clear vision of, why you're doing this and how it's ultimately going to help you move forward. And then set an intention of showing up throughout the divorce process in ways that allow you to move towards that vision. And then with that, it's like when you feel yourself in that, that place I mentioned earlier, ready to kill Bill, that 1, 2, or 3, um, rather than allowing yourself to just mindlessly react, choose to step back, take a deep breath, and recognize that you are in a space where you have what we sometimes refer to as red zone lenses. So most of us are familiar with the idea of rose colored lenses. Red zone lenses literally color the world in a way that your perception is distorted, which means you can't believe what you think, you can't believe what you see, you can't believe what you hear, and you definitely cannot trust an impulse to act. So rather than, respond from that place with those red zone lenses, what I recommend doing.
Diana, you're
Mhm.
you're 12 minutes, but you can go
Okay, I'll
3
wrap
more
it up.
minutes. So yeah, no
Wrap it up.
worries.
So rather than respond, what I recommend doing is acknowledging that you're in that space, recognizing it without any judgment, and then taking a moment to just breathe. And if you need to, come up with a mantra, ideally something that is driven by that vision for your life. Um, but if you can't think of anything, the default one that always works is I am safe. So do your breaths 5 to 10, the deeper the better. The more stressed out and pissed off you are, the more breaths you're going to need. So don't think that there's like a quota. just however many you need to like get yourself to a place where whatever it is that you're believing is of risk to you, whether it's financial, emotional, reputational, just tell yourself that you're safe. And if after doing some breathing, 5 to 10 or more, and repeating a mantra of your choosing, if you still feel like activated, then the next step would be to just do something that makes you feel good. So for me, that is finding somewhere where I can be alone and playing a YouTube video of people salsa dancing and dancing along with them. But for each person, it's different. My hack for figuring out ones for each person is just to ask, like, what did 5-year-old you love to do? That's usually a clue. But stop, breathe, and if you need more, then do something that 5-year-old you would love. And using that technique to help you, honor your intention of setting up in ways that help you fulfill your green zone vision of what you want your life to be after a divorce. And that's my presentation. Crickets. Is this thing on?
There we go.
Sorry.
Now, can you see us? I don't know if you can see people are clapping.
Oh, oh.
So, I'm going to give the floor to everybody. What I want to say to you is, first of all, though, it is so interesting just how much you played with your hair. I just want to comment about, and I'm just curious
I'm
whether
on my
you
cell
were.
phone and I feel I'm like uncomfortable right now, so it's like definitely a nervous habit.
Okay,
right now.
so I would love to hear more about the discomfort. What I want to say is that was a really clear presentation. First of all, of your why. Why did you choose this topic? Which was such an interesting way. Like, I've never been divorced. Why the hell am I talking about that? But it really touched me about your mother and just how serious the consequences of doing a red zone divorce are. And then being a lawyer that also sees the serious consequences of red zone divorces.